is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me, as always, is the editor-in-chief of Unwinnable.com. He says that the fish they serve at the Thistle is nothing like the fish people in Saltmarsh. Stu Horvath.
That works for both the things that we're going to talk about today.
I know, there's a sweet duality to it. I've been working on it all week. It's just hard to say the Thistle.
Yeah. For those who don't know, Thistle is a great fish and chips place in town.
In the town we live in, which is awesome. So today we are actually not going to talk about what we're playing. We're actually going to do what we call a double meet podcast, where we're going to talk about two classic RPGs, one of which has been reimagined as The Ghosts of Saltmarsh, released by Wizards of the Coast, which is awesome. And the other is Lovecraft Country.
Yeah, Hammond, let's talk about that first. But before we do, I just want to be clear about something. Double meat, is that a Subway thing?
Oh, I think it's a Subway thing. So this is what we call a double meat or Beyond Meat episode for those who don't get down on the meat.
There you go.
We're something for everybody, man.
We have vegan options.
We do have vegan options. Now I'm hungry. So let's talk about the Lovecraft Country.
So Lovecraft Country is part of the 90s golden age of Call of Cthulhu. Chaosium just put out all of these books that were just so good, so perfect. And like, I love where they're at now, and it looks like they're going into a second golden age, but there was a time, Hambone, where it wasn't that good.
Yeah, buddy.
And it was a long time. This was sort of the height of, I think, their production quality of that time, too. The books were really good, solid. They had good art, and all of those things sort of disappear eventually. But these are awesome. So there's 4 of them. They start in 1990. Keith Herber, who is sort of a legendary Call of Cthulhu developer, this is sort of his big thing. He's one of the guys who kind of modernized the game and took it through the 90s, and he's no longer with us, unfortunately.
That's terrible.
But he starts out with Arkham Unveiled, and then the second volume is Return to Dunwich, and then he hands it off to Kevin A. Ross, who's another developer, and he does Kingport, City in the Mist, and the final one, which is an absolute bona fide, one of the best role-playing supplements ever made, Escape from Innsmouth. Now, all 4 of those towns are iconic, locations of H.P. Lovecraft stories.
Oh, absolutely.
So like anybody who's a fan of H.P. Lovecraft is like, oh, Arkham, I know that. And Innsmouth, that's where the fish people live.
I mean, truth be told, in a previous episode, I talked about how I never actually read the Call of Cthulhu.
That's right.
So that said, my knowledge of Lovecraft, I know all these locations. I know what goes on in these locations.
Bad stuff.
Bad stuff.
Terrible things. They're all witch-haunted, full of secrets that will kill you.
Everything kills you.
Tentacles under the ground.
Oh, but it's all good stuff.
It is. It's so good.
Great adventure hooks.
So they each have their own separate character, right? And they form up together a Lovecraftian New England of the 1920s, which is sort of like I guess it's a campaign setting, but it never felt like that to me. It never felt like I was getting marketed to the same way as, like, say, a Forgotten Realms.
Right.
Where like, it's like, okay, we're going to put out source book after source book after source book. It's just like, there's 4 of these. It's the towns, and they're exhaustive. So Arkham, right? Arkham is sort of the most civilized of the 4. It's a university town. Well, like all the other 3 have all sort of slipped into a sort of moral and physical decay.
Yeah.
Arkham is still kind of holding it together.
It's what we call Riverdale in 2019, but go on.
Okay, yeah. That's actually a really good example. It's a university town. There's still witches there, and some of those witches are the same witches that have been there all this time. Like
Immortality, pacts with Satan. Stuff like that.
Exactly. And, none of that leads to a good place. But so, like I said, under subterranean vaults filled with viscous liquid that comes up and smothers you, and, all the great gooey Lovecraftian stuff. But
it's just so gross. Just keep talking.
So Arkham Unveiled, what I think is fascinating about it is that it's a block by block source book. Like, you look at the map and there's numbers on the map for every house.
So similar to like a D&D map.
Yeah, except I don't think that any of the D&D city books or boxes ever really delved into a setting like this, because it's literally detailing every resident of note.
Okay.
Of an entire city.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, it's not every resident, but it's definitely every resident that you might find useful.
All the little threads for the story that you're telling.
Exactly. So like, you have your ne'er-do-wells, it tells you who's sleeping with whose behind whose back and, all the social webs that keep all these people together. And then it gets into the dark secrets, the more occult nature. But it's just this huge undertaking. And it's like, 120 pages. But there's so much just pure, useful game master content in there to just dig into. And the same is true for all of the other 4 books. Dunwich is more of a rural, landlocked, decayed, kind of backwoodsy country. There's a lot of weird stuff like hills that are hollow and have strange things inside them and invisible monsters and inbred hillbillies, that sort of thing.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, this is the material.
It's people who live in the hills.
Yeah, hill people. There you go.
It's a little more nice, I guess.
Kingport is sort of like an artist colony on the coast. It's a little bit nicer. It's sort of like a resort town, but it too has its underground vaults filled with, necromancers and such. And it has also this really cool dreamlike quality, like the border between reality and the dreamlands is like really thin there. So like everything has like this William Blake romantic poet kind of vibe.
Oh, like how they show you Portugal is always sepia toned and like airy, except this is grayscale and evil.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Kingport on the surface is a really pleasant place to visit. You might have some bad dreams,
Yeah.
But there's one great scenario in there that there's like a poet who commits suicide and you like dream through his poems in the adventure and try and figure out how he died, what he ran afoul of. And it's just so good.
See, I love that. That, I think, is a cool hook.
Yeah. And then you have Innsmouth, which is, your classic decayed seafaring town filled with hybrid fish people.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, and all of these things are detailed on a house by house basis. So like Dunwich, even though it's like this larger rural kind of farmland layout, there's still clusters of buildings and it details all of it. You piece together like this really weird history. There's the fungi from Yuggoth, like have mines and like that's going right over your head.
Yeah. I was like, can you put that in a sentence?
Yeah. They're the Migo, they're from Yuggoth, which I think is Pluto. And I think that they're fungus that are super intelligent. They have like ray guns and they take your brain out of your head and they put it in this canister and then they hook you up to a machine. Yeah. And now you're still like.
No, I'm listening. I'm just picturing it in my brain. Where I am stuck, which I think is a good place to be stuck, is that you're talking about going, house to house in the town and everything's a different experience. To me, it harkens back to the House of Mystery, the old DC comic, which was their horror comic, where you had the guy who was telling the stories kind of like the Crypt Keeper, but it was the DC Comics version of the Crypt Keeper.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the most amazing but really abstract and horrific way to go, like trick-or-treating, like every house you go to. It's like, instead of like this, here's a Butterfinger. Or we're in the rich neighborhood. Here's like a full-size Nestle's Crunch. It's all horror.
Oh yeah, every
and
house.
Cosmic horror at that.
Yeah, every house has, you're exactly right. It's like every house is its own different specific house of horrors, and it's wonderful. So in Lovecraft's story, The Shadow over Innsmouth, narrator goes to town, narrator pisses off the fish people, narrator has to flee, narrator goes to the feds and says that town is messed up. Feds go off camera and bomb the reef off the coast, round people up, and it's like really weird.
So wait a second. For the first time ever, someone actually goes, maybe I should just go right to the feds and instead of trying to handle it myself.
Yes.
Wow. Talk about progressive.
Seriously. The cool thing about Escape from Innsmouth is that the main scenario lets you take part in the raid on Innsmouth when the feds and the Coast Guard actually go into town, round up these people, and like deal with horrible monsters that are there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is very different than the classic style of Cthulhu play.
It's even more different because you're military men almost, and you're split into 5 or 6 different teams. So there's 5 or 6 mini scenarios and the action's constantly cutting to different things. You're really playing 5 different characters in different scenarios, if that makes sense.
That's awesome. Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah, and then it all kind of comes together and it's horrible and everybody dies.
Even with all the military guys?
No, I mean, they win in the end, I guess. But like a lot of people die and horrible stuff happens.
Well, I guess like all Cthulhu and masks and things of that ilk, there's a victory, but it's always a Pyrrhic victory.
Yeah.
Did I say that word right?
You did.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's the point, is that no matter how well you succeed, you're only ever going to be a stopgap.
Right.
Like you're only ever buying time for the next guy to hopefully buy some more time, right?
So these books aren't modules per se. These books are a way to further paint the world, say adding more colors to your palette if you're running Cthulhu?
It's both. So the bulk of the books is devoted to the kind of source book campaign setting approach. And then you get a couple scenarios in the back.
That's awesome.
I can't really understate the detail and how that detail serves four completely different atmospheres and allows, and like these are towns that are not far away. It's not like we're talking about like regions of forgotten realms.
It's New England.
Yeah, like they're 20-minute car rides.
Well, I mean, it's like 4 hours from us, but nonetheless.
But from each other, they're
Right.
20-minute car rides. It creates like this really small, really haunted world. And it's all really different. This is such a gold standard for campaign setting kind of source book work. And I think that a lot of people looked at this stuff and you could see it. You could see how after this point, it kind of gets into the general pool of RPG DNA and how you make kind of a compelling campaign setting.
That's amazing. Are these books hard to find?
They've recently re-released them. I don't know if those print runs are still available, but like they're out there. I do recommend, at least in the case of Arkham Unveiled, I think they renamed it in the reprint H.P. Lovecraft's Arkham or whatever. Don't buy that one because they got rid of all the original art.
Ah, boo.
Which, whatever, like you could always replace art and it's fine. But they replaced it with this terrible 3D rendered art, like
Ugh.
from a video card from 10 years ago. So it's like, it just doesn't look good. Like try and find the original Arkham Unveiled. The others kept the original art.
Now, it doesn't look good, or it doesn't look good on the cover of a VHS box at West Coast Video.
I'm just going to go with it doesn't look good.
Fair enough.
West Coast Video, Jesus.
Yeah. I figured Blockbuster was a little too over the plate, so I kind of hit you with the local.
Yeah.
So, Stu, do you have any final thoughts on the Lovecraft Country books?
I do, but before I get there, why was it called West Coast Video? We're on the East Coast.
I never understood that.
It's like, why is it East Coast? Did they have East Coast
I guess
Video
maybe it was
in
a
LA
chain.
or something?
Yeah, I know, I've never seen East Coast Video.
We always get the shaft.
We do.
The one other thing that is really, I think, important about these books is the art. The art sells the location so well. John T. Snyder's work on Return to Dunwich is absolutely horrific and is like, whenever I go on a trip and I'm not near the coast and there's too many trees, like I'm a city guy. So
Me
like
too.
when you put trees in large
like it.
numbers, I don't like it. Like that's what his art is. It's just like that uncomfortable feeling I get when I'm in the rural area. Like my wife is from West Jersey. Whenever we go out there, I'm just like, it's too dark. I can't see.
Can we leave before the sun goes down?
Exactly. Why is there a mist? There's always a mist.
Oh, I never feel comfortable when I see a mist.
Yeah.
Never. I'm not an outdoor kid.
Yeah. And then in the Kingport book, Jason Eckhart does the art and he does the Innsmouth book too. And he just gets both of the really tranquil, dreamy seaport town and then that awful decayed seaport town in each subsequent volume and just nails the atmosphere so good. You should buy these books just for the art if you're like a Lovecraft head.
So as always, we're going to have more Lovecraft on the show in the future. If you do have any questions about these books, feel free to hit us up on Twitter or on our Instagram at Vintage RPG.
Yeah, I covered all of these on the feed about a year ago.
Very cool. So before we get into the next segment, I want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Noble Knight Games. They've thrown another coupon code our way. This time, it's Classics. And this is good for $5 off orders of $25 or more, either in-store or in person, and it's running from May 27th through June 15th, 2019. So check out nobleknight.com and don't forget to use the promo code Classics. Why not use it to buy your own copy of Ghosts of Saltmarsh? All right, Stu, so now let's talk about Ghosts of Saltmarsh.
Ooh.
Brand new from Wizards of the Coast, and our friends at Wizards were kind enough to send us a review copy. And this is one that I've been waiting for a very long time. Now, many, many moons ago, when I bought a whole bunch of first edition Dungeons & Dragons mods, I bought the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh. And it was originally produced by a UK branch of TSR in 1981, designed by Dave J. Brown and Don Turnbull. It was a very, very different kind of mod that I don't want to get too far into because for people who are going to buy this book, I don't want to spoil the twist. Now, what's cool about Ghosts of Saltmarsh is it is a seafaring adventure. It is a source book that not only gives you background on the town of Saltmarsh and the people, and it gives you more NPCs and more backgrounds on those people, you also get the original 3 modules, which are pretty cool. Because they did a thing where, like with Ravenloft, they give them to you intact. So you get the original 3 modules, which are the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh, Danger at Dunwater, and the Final Enemy.
Which is like the worst title for a module ever.
It is kind of the worst title for a module ever. I will not dispute that fact.
Like in 81, it was a terrible title for a module.
Well, the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh, high marks.
Oh yeah, A+.
The Danger at Dunwater, pretty good.
Again, still working the alliteration.
I'm going to give you like a B+ on that. The Final Enemy.
It's the title that just says what it is.
It just lets you know.
Oh.
There's no pomp and circumstance here, guys. It's the Final Enemy.
Yeah.
So
they may as well have called it Boss Fight.
See, Boss Fight would have been a better title.
Yeah, actually.
So I was very excited to get my hands on this. I do like what Wizards does where they take an old mod. Now, if you look on the internet, you put it in the Google machine, you'll see that the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh is always in the top 20 of classic D&D modules. So it's a pretty cool starting point to build a book around. I can't really speak for the Final Enemy. However, Danger at Dunwater and the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh are actually very, very great modules.
I think that Final Enemy is generally regarded as a good module, but inferior to the other two.
Right.
It doesn't have the interesting twists and turns that the other two have.
The other two have some great twists and turns. I liken it to when we played Against the Slavers, and that first module was, oh my God, one of the best modules we've ever played.
Oh, yeah.
And the second module was still pretty good. The third module, it's like, you're running out of ideas. And the fourth module is, man, you should have went home on the third.
Was it the fourth one where like you get captured and you lose all your stuff?
I think so.
It's such a garbage. Ugh.
It's like, well, but now we're at like this much higher level. How are we doing that?
Yeah, come on.
I digress.
Yeah.
Either way, I like how they take a classic, very well-regarded module and build a world around it. Since they started rolling out 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, they've done everything very methodically. You get to see the world presented to you in small pieces as shown through the modules that they produce, like Tyranny of Dragons, like Princes of the Apocalypse, like Storm King's Thunder, like Curse of Strahd, which I think is a very interesting way to build out a world. Now, somewhere in between there, they did put out the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, which does give you a lot of great feel for Faerun and the area surrounding.
I'm glad that you brought up Sword Coast because I'm super confused actually at this point because I thought that I'm not being critical yet.
Yet.
I thought that the generic setting was Forgotten Realms for 5th edition. But now that I'm thinking about it, like what was Ravenloft?
In Barovia.
In Barovia.
Yeah, on the Demiplane of Dread.
Okay.
So they're breaking off pieces of what I would consider their extended universe and bringing it into the fold.
See, a lot of the stuff I read about Ghosts of Saltmarsh said that it was a setting agnostic book, but it's very specifically Greyhawk.
It really is.
And like they mentioned Ayus and they mentioned Greyhawk, and I'm just like confused. I thought that there hasn't been a Greyhawk source book.
No,
right?
there has not been a Greyhawk source book.
It's weird. And has there been an Eberron or Mystara?
There has been like an Eberron kind of plug-in on D&D Beyond, but there hasn't been an actual source book that's come out for it. And also nothing official that's come out that said, hey, we're Greyhawk. Nothing official that's come out and said, hey, we're a Mystara. I kind of appreciate that though, because I like the way you get to kind of play in the sandbox that you have and get kind of used to it, really get a feel for the land, get a feel for the people, start making some really cool NPCs without getting bogged down by decades worth of world building that's happened. Like you get to actually build in the world as the world is being built.
Oh yeah, I totally agree with you. I was just, as somebody who doesn't really dig into the 5th edition books, I was just a little confused because there are some notes on how to plug it into Mystara and Eberron. And I was just like, I haven't thought about Eberron since 3rd edition.
That's definitely something that I remember people playing characters in Eberron in 3.5 being like, I don't understand.
Like you do what?
You do what? You're a half robot person?
How does that work?
Because we can do anything. It's fantasy role playing. Yeah. So this book is cool too. It has ship fighting rules, which I think is very interesting because I've never in 5th edition encountered things where you're going to be fighting in ships. So because Saltmarsh is on the water, they have different classes of ships and different stats for the ships. And what I like is that they actually build the stats out just like they would a monster. So you have strength, you have dexterity, you have constitution. Of course, you don't have like wisdom, charisma, intelligence. You're a boat.
I don't know. I've seen some pretty damn charismatic boats.
Oh, I believe that. Well, speaking of charisma, they do give you a way to build a charismatic boat. Now,
Wait, what?
Oh, no, they do.
Really?
A little further down in the ships and sea section, you actually have a thing where you can get superior ship upgrades, like hull upgrades, make your ship a death vessel, a frost-locked hull, make a living vessel, a clockwork oars. You could get like oars that'll like attack boats if they get too close to you, kind of like the spikes in Death Race 2000 that pop out of the wheels, but in a boat.
Nice.
It's pretty cool. It's very well thought out. I like it too because it also does the thing in D&D that I love, that it gives you a rumor mill. It gives you random encounters. In between the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh, the Danger of Dunwater, and the final enemy, there's 2 other adventures to really flesh out the story further. It actually gives you a great feel for a seafaring town. It does a really good job of helping you build NPCs that are special and very unique to this kind of area. I kind of liken it to when I went to Ireland, and the kind of people who lived in the Dingle Peninsula are very, very different kind of people than who are living in Dublin or even in Galway City. Like, it's that very special and specific. I live in a shore town.
Yeah.
I live by the water, you know? We close the pubs early here.
I think that Saltmarsh, the details on the town are the best part. I think that they just did such a great job, especially because if you recall, and I don't know if our listeners realize this, but in the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh, which takes place in a town called Saltmarsh, they never bothered to detail the town.
No, not at all. When I ran it, I actually had to come up with my own what's going on in the town, because you just start right at the foot of the house.
Yeah, it's just a really frustrating detail. This Saltmarsh is sort of drawn upon in Dungeon Master's Guide 2 for 3.5. They use Saltmarsh as sort of an example of how to build a town back whenever that came out. And this is sort of built on that. But that one was very much more like a city, and this is more of a fishing village. And like, this one feels right, and I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, they definitely did a good job with that portion of it. They also did a pretty cool job too with, in the ship area, like different problems that you're going to run into at sea, different hazards at sea, like fog, like lure lights, like eldritch mists.
I mean, I love a good encounter table.
Listen, some of my favorite parts about playing Dungeons and Dragons is sitting there with these goofy books being like, oh my God, look at this encounter table. They have all these stats. And like, now I'm like, and it gives me the wonderful ideas of like, oh, well, I would never have thought to put that creature in a random encounter, but here we are, a giant on the ocean. Okay, I'm listening. Also got some cool new monsters in this book as well. And I am always a fan of new monsters that are specific to a setting. I do wish there were more monster pictures in this book. However, the monsters that they do throw at you are pretty cool.
It's sort of light on illustrations in general, I feel like.
It is a little bit light on illustrations. That said, the maps that they draw are pretty awesome. The designs of the ship are really great too.
I think my favorite thing about 5e is for the house cartographer does such an awesome job. I'm not a huge map guy unless they're awesome maps, and then I'm just such a mush for them. Like Tomb of Annihilation had great maps. It's the same guy does the Saltmarsh map. It's just so good.
It's fantastic. Whoever does the maps is definitely getting a merit badge. For sure. Definitely got that cartography merit badge.
I mean, he's an employed cartographer. I think that's in the rear view a little bit.
Look, as a guy who didn't get many merit badges, I would very much be like, hey, here's my merit badge in cartography. And this is what qualifies me to say, no, we're drawing the map this way.
Fair enough.
So this book is awesome. It was designed by Mike Merles and Kate Welch. Did a fantastic job with the book. It's got 2 different covers. One cover is the classic D&D 5th edition style cover with a little bit of red on the binding that's going to look great with the other D&D books. The deluxe cover, which is only found in game shops, is done by N.C. Winters, and it captures the ferocious hunger of the deadly Sagwin in its stunning cover piece. Now, I read that word for word from the book because I wanted to try to pronounce Sanguin.
I've always said Sahagwin.
Shit.
But hey, I don't know.
I'm trying to get better at saying fantasy names, Stu.
I'm no expert. I will tell you that I do not like the special edition cover because it has a little bit of a shimmer to it, and it was really hard to shoot. It has nothing to do with the quality of the art. It has everything to do with the ink that they used. It made it very difficult to reproduce.
It does have a very Spelljammer shimmer. Shimmer.
Yeah.
So
I actually like the shimmer. It's just I don't like working with the shimmer.
I can totally understand that. So yeah, pretty cool book. I highly recommend you check it out if you've been playing 5th edition D&D. If you're looking for something a little bit different than what you've seen so far in 5th edition, this is the book for you. So definitely check out Ghosts of Saltmarsh at your local gaming store now. So that was it for this episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast.
Hey, wait, you cut me off before I could get critical.
Oh, shit.
Oh,
Okay.
well, we're out of time.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good thing that I already posted about this. You can read it on the feed.
Well, you could definitely check out the Instagram feed where Stu gets critical on just about everything. Stu, where can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram at VintageRPG. We post daily. And you can also find me all the time at unwinnable.com writing about cool stuff.
You can find me on Twitter at Hambreaker. I pretty much exclusively tweet about Dungeons and Dragons, professional wrestling, and cute animals. You can follow my adventures on Instagram at John Hambone McGuire. I'm showing off the things I do in my day-to-day life and the podcast that I produce. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dega West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.